Hi, how are you? It's Pete Posner at Big Break English, and today we're going to do some work on punctuation. So I'm going to give you 5 tips to correctly use commas in IELTS writing tasks, and this will help you to work towards gaining a band score 7 for grammar, range, and accuracy. And we're going to do this on the topic of health and fitness, as this is a typical IELTS topic. So, just before we get going, you can find me on Facebook, Twitter, and my website. Okay, so this is the topic of health and fitness, a typical IELTS topic. And here are some questions that you might be asked, either in speaking or writing. Okay, so we have, what is a healthy lifestyle? What causes obesity? What are the advantages and disadvantages of home cooked meals? Okay, so what we're going to do today, we're focusing on punctuation and specifically 5 tips for using commas in IELTS writing task 2. Okay, so we're going to do that, but we're going to at the same time we're going to talk about ideas around these types of questions on this topic of health and fitness. Okay, so the first punctuation tip for using commas is you should include a comma between each item in a list of 3 or more items. Okay, so let's take a look at this first example A. It says, a good diet includes sources of protein, fruit, and vegetables. Okay, so how many items do we have in that list? We have, well, protein, that's 1, fruit, number 2, and vegetables, number 3. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is add a comma here. Sources of protein, fruit. So we could add another comma here. I say could, I'll explain that in a second. And vegetables. Okay, so the reason why I only said we could add a comma here is because in British English, for the last item in the list, usually we don't have a comma. That's because we have and, right? So at the end of a list, in British English, usually we don't have a comma before the last item. We use and or, right? In American English, usually they do put a comma here. I'm British, so I'm not going to use a comma. Let's take a look at the second example. B. Sugar-loaded foods can lead to obesity, diabetes, and heart disease. Okay, how many items can you see? Obesity, diabetes, heart disease. That's 3 items again. Okay, so after obesity, a comma. Diabetes, again, American English, we could add another comma, but I'm British, so I won't. So I just add 1 comma. Obesity, diabetes, and heart disease. So that's the first tip. Okay, tip 2. You should place a comma before a coordinating conjunction and or but, so, among others, that links 2 clauses. Okay, let's look at an example to see how that works. So, example A, it says, he doesn't have a healthy diet. That's the first clause, right? If you're not sure what a clause is, think about the fact that a clause usually has a subject and a verb. So here we have subject he, doesn't have. So we've got the auxiliary doesn't and then the verb have. A healthy diet. Okay, so that's clause 1. And he's too sedentary. That's clause 2. All right, again, he, subject, is verb. So we have a second clause. Okay, so what we need to do, I'll just get my pen. We need to add here a comma before the coordinating conjunction. Okay, so in this case, and. Okay. Okay, let's look at a second example. Example B. Skipping meals earlier in the day can lead to overeating later in the evening. Okay, that's clause 1. So, there we have our coordinating conjunction. It is better to eat regularly. That's the second clause. So, we're going to add a comma before the coordinating conjunction, so. Okay, and a third example. Example C. Convenience foods are designed to be cheap, tasty, and non-perishable. That's the first clause, right? But they contain added sugars and fats. That's the second clause, okay? So in this case, the coordinating conjunction is but, right? So we're going to add a comma before the coordinating conjunction but. And also you may have noticed something else. Where else do we need a comma? Did you get it? So there's a list, right? So we have convenience foods are designed to be cheap, tasty, and non-perishable. 3 items, right? Cheap, 1, tasty, 2, non-perishable, 3. So we're going to write a comma after cheap. And then tasty, I'm not American, I'm British, so I won't add a comma here. But it's correct to do so. And non-perishable. Okay. Also notice here that the second clause, but they contain added sugars and fats. How many items do we have? Only 2, added sugars and fats. So there we wouldn't add a comma. Okay, so that is tip 2. And also a little bit more practice on tip 1. Okay, tip 3 is you should use a comma after a subordinate clause at the beginning of a sentence. Okay, so a subordinate clause, for example, an if clause. I'm going to look at 3 examples. Okay, so the first example with an if clause. Okay, so if you have a food allergy. Okay, so that's the subordinate clause, right? So then it says be sure to avoid any ingredients that could cause an allergic reaction. That's the main clause. Okay, so we have to put a comma before that subordinate if clause. There we go. Okay. Example B. Although, okay, so that word introduces the subordinate clause. Although eating too much fast food makes people overweight, this is the staple diet for quite a large sector of the population. So can you see where we need to put our comma? So the subordinate clause ends here, right? And then that's the main clause, right? This is, okay, so subject, verb, this is the staple diet for quite a large sector of the population. Okay, and finally, example C, since, so this time the word since introduces the subordinate clause. Since consuming convenience foods doesn't require much planning, preparation, or cleaning up afterwards, they save a lot of time. So can you see where that subordinate clause ends? Since consuming convenience food doesn't require much planning, preparation, or cleaning up time afterwards, they, that's the subject for the main clause. So we're going to put the comma before that, after the subordinate clause. they save a lot of time. So the main clause, they, subject, save, verb. That's the main clause. Okay. Okay, and again here, did you notice again that we have a list of items? So we have convenience foods, consuming convenience foods doesn't require much planning, preparation, or cleaning up afterwards. Again, we have a list of 3 items. Okay, so we're going to add a comma after planning. Right, so planning, that's the first item. Preparation, the second, and the last item. Again, we could add a comma before or, but in British English we usually don't do that. Okay, so we'll leave it at that. So that's the third tip. Okay, time for tip number 4. You should use a comma after an introductory word or phrase. Okay, so again, 3 examples. A, after a big dinner, it's a good idea to go for a little walk. Okay, so what is the introductory phrase in this case? After a big dinner, did you get it? So this is referring to time, right? A time phrase, after a big dinner, comma, it is a good idea to go for a little walk. Okay, example B. Also, pre-packaged food can contain a lot of unhealthy additives. So what is the introductory word? Here it is, also. Okay, so also, so introducing additional information. So also, comma, pre-packaged food can contain a lot of unhealthy additives. And finally, example C, this is a longer one. It is true that home cooking can be time consuming and some ingredients can be costly. However, home cooked meals are nutritious and you have control of the ingredients you use. Okay, so take a look at that second sentence. What is the introductory word? Did you get it? Yeah, here it's however. Okay, so however, comma, that introduces contrast. Home cooked meals are nutritious. Now, also here there are 2 coordinating conjunctions, or 1 coordinating conjunction used twice in each of those, once in each of those sentences. Can you find it? So it's and, yeah, so we got, however, home cooked meals are nutritious, comma, right? And you have control of the ingredients you use. And also in that first sentence, it is true that home cooking can be time consuming, right, comma, yeah, and some ingredients can be costly. Okay, so that is tip 4, and a little bit more practice on using commas before coordinating conjunctions. Okay, and finally, time for tip number 5. So tip 5 is use commas to separate non-essential information that could be removed from a sentence without changing the meaning of the essential information. Okay, so that extra information, if you like, that is non-essential, could be a phrase or it could be a clause. Okay, so let's take a look at example A. So A says, a glass of fresh orange juice in the morning, which is high in vitamin C, is recommended to prevent a cold or the flu. Okay, so can you see that there is an extra clause that we could take out and it wouldn't change the meaning of the essential information? Did you find it? It's introduced with which. Okay, so the essential information is a glass of fresh orange juice in the morning is recommended to prevent a cold or the flu. Okay, we have an extra clause which we're going to separate with commas. Right, so here which is high in vitamin C, there. Okay, so that clause we can take out. It's extra. It's extra information. It's non-essential. Okay. Okay, let's look at example B, which is, this time it's just a phrase that is the non-essential information. See if you can identify it. Okay, so B, obesity, a worldwide problem, requires the urgent attention of government policy. Okay, so can you see which part there we could take out? Yeah, so the essential information is obesity. Obesity requires the urgent attention of government policy. Okay, and here's an extra phrase which we can separate by also using commas, right? So a worldwide problem, right? So we can take that out, and it doesn't alter the meaning of the essential information. Let's take a look at a final example with an extra clause. Okay, so a non-essential clause. Okay, so diabetes, which is increasingly common among young people, has been linked to obesity. Okay, so what do you think is the essential information? Is it that diabetes is increasingly common among young people? Or is it that diabetes has been linked to obesity? Okay, well, in this sentence, the structure of this sentence, the essential information is diabetes has been linked to obesity, right? So again, which is used to introduce non-essential information. And we're going to separate that extra information clause by using commas. Okay, so diabetes, comma, which is increasingly common among young people, comma, has been linked to obesity. Okay, so those are 5 tips for using commas correctly in punctuation that will help you to work towards getting level 7 band score in grammatical range and accuracy for IELTS writing tasks. Okay, so that's all for now, and all the best with your preparation, and see you again soon.